Yeah, NXT from May the 6th, 2025. Really good show. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Even though I wasn't a big fan of that Battle Royal, there's a whole lot of bums in that Battle Royal, but still it made sense, and we got a surprise winner, which I really appreciated. So let's get into it, and then later we're going to discuss Riley Osborne, the young man who was cut, who of course disagreed with Brian Alvarez's reasoning about him being cut. There's a lot going on there, and we're going to discuss that after the review. But first, Hank and Tank teamed up with Joe Hendry to lose to the Dark State. This was an okay match. Joe Hendry was distracted by Trick Williams, who attacked Joe Hendry, and I'm not sure that it was behind the ref's back. I'm pretty sure the ref could have seen that if he wanted to and disqualified him, but the match continued, and Dark State ended up pinning Hank or Tank, or I don't know which one it was. It doesn't matter. But they beat him with what I call the alley-oop powerbomb. So this, of course, is setting up, like I said last week, that Dark State would probably end up being in the tag team ranks for a while and feuding with Hank and Tank. So everything seems to be working out very well here. Joe Hendry was pissed about Trick Williams and decided he was going to show up during the number one contenders battle royal to cost Trick Williams the match. And that was the third match on the show. It was the NXT battle royal. Let's talk about the special entries. Elijah from TNA, who of course was the Drifter Elias in WWE, got one of the biggest reactions when he came out. Just a huge reaction. Of course, the guy was on WWE TV forever, but he's also an NXT alumni, which made this even sweeter. Remember the days of Elias as the Drifter not being somebody that was a favorite on NXT. In fact, I remember certain people, certain podcasters I used to listen to at the time were saying that he needed to drift away. And this was before, of course, he would go on to be Elias on the main roster, because while Triple H was booking Bobby Roode to be the main event, and, you know, it was TNA guys and indie guys all over the place, there were actual developmental talent. You know, I think he was a heavy metal Jesus or a punk rock Jesus or something like that on the indies before he came to WWE. But he wasn't one of the huge touted indie wrestlers when he came in, and he ended up being one of the biggest stars from NXT during that era, that 2016 to 2019 era. Elias ended up being a staple of the company, being super over, getting massive reactions, etc. And it wasn't until Triple H decided that you cannot have any fun anymore that he got rid of him and guys like Eric Bugenhagen, who were basically fun characters, marginal in-ring talents. They were good enough, but mostly they were entertainment guys. So it was great that he got this wonderful reaction when he came back. I was thoroughly impressed. Very good. Swipe Right, who are the two Ken dolls who popped up on Evolve, they've been here so much that there's really no point in acting like they're special entries. They're there all the time now. Sean Legacy, who is also a Evolve talent. He's an indie wrestler as far as I know, but I don't know that much about him. Like, I haven't seen him on a lot of indie shows. But he really kicks ass down in Evolve. I know he impressed a lot of people in this Battle Royal. He was in the Final 5, by the way. So he's pretty good. He kind of reminds me of Tyler Bate, except for he has a little bit more personality, which is what Tyler Bate is missing here in the world. Zachary Wentz from TNA made an appearance, of course. Him and Wesley had a moment in this match, because of course they did. Why wouldn't they? And then there was three guys from Legends of Future Greats whose names I didn't quite catch, but one of them, who I believe is Shiloh Hill, who has a missing front tooth, he lasted pretty deep into the match before getting eliminated. And of course there was Trick Williams and Javon Evans and Ethan Page, and Lexus King and those kinds of guys too. So Trick Williams was running the shop. Of course, he was the big dog, the main star of this whole thing, until Joe Hendry's theme song played and he got distracted. When he turned around to face Joe Hendry, he was thrown out by Elijah. And it just when I was like, hey man, Elijah could quite possibly wrestle Obafemi for the NXT championship. That could be fun, especially with what they would do later. Like, it could be fun. They could do something like that. And then they had Elijah be eliminated by Sean Bloody Spears. I wanted to German suplex myself. Jeez Louise, Sean. What are you thinking of? What are you doing here, brother? This is a problem. This is idiocy. So, once Elijah was out, I'm pretty sure Kevin Owens was happy. One of the most favorable storylines of, again, the last 5 or 6 years was Elias and Kevin Owens. They had so much fun. And you're not allowed to have fun anymore. Kevin Owens has to be a very seriously manic-y, fat, depressed weirdo now, I guess. So the final 5 ended up being Shawn Legacy, Javon Evans, Ethan Page, Shawn Spears, and Miles Bourne. Miles Bourne, of all people. So, earlier in the show, Miles Bourne was hanging out with the rest of the No Quarter Cash crew. And Dempsey was saying, hey, of course, it's all every man for himself, but one of us has to win in order for the NQCC to fight for the title. And yeah, that was the plan, and nobody thought that any of them were going to win. I mean, come on, seriously. These guys, for starters, they almost never wrestle singles matches. Secondly, they almost never win. So, to my great surprise, after a heroic effort by Javon Evans, and he ended up getting eliminated by Ethan Page and Shawn Spears, who were working together, Miles Bourne eliminated both of those bums to win the match. Miles Bourne. And let me tell you, I'm not a person that is upset by underdog victories. This one is a shot out of left field. This screams Shawn Michaels. This doesn't feel like Triple H, right? Like, there's a bunch of decision makers in NXT. This feels like a Shawn Michaels decision. Like, he just decided on a whim, we're gonna put it on this guy here. Like, he's been working underneath, busting his ass, having good tag team matches, not much in the way of a singles act. And then his very first pay-per-view match is going to be a singles match. Well, this might be his first singles pay-per-view match. It's going to be a championship match. I'll tell you, I love it. I like this. Miles Bourne is a good wrestler. He's not going to win. I don't expect him to win. But this is the kind of matches that make or break a run for a guy like Obafemi. Because if you look at all the star power in NXT, he's beaten all those guys already. He's already beaten Ethan Page, and who the hell wants to see him wrestle Shawn Spears? He's already, beat Trick Williams. He's already beaten Javon. Like the TNA guys, other than Elias or Joe Hendry, But for the most part, you do want to see sometimes on NXT or even on the main roster, unsuspecting underdog contenders. This is what made wrestling fun when I was young. Like, I remember when Shawn Michaels was the champion, and I believe he had a random championship match on Superstars with either Justin Hart Bradshaw or X-Pac or something like that. And then they did the Raw Thursday situation where I believe Goldust won a Battle Royal. I think he had won a Battle Royal like a week before or something like that. And I remember that match, and I remember just like, wow, it's not normal for Goldust to be the number one contender. And he was one of the top guys at the time, but it was fun. Like the Triple H versus Tajiri matches, or the Triple H versus Takamichi Noku kind of match. Those things can be fun. Nobody expects the other guy to win, but it's fun. It can further along at least that guy's story. And that's what this is going to happen here. It's going to further along Miles Bourne's story. Obafemi has to be on the card, but he doesn't have to wrestle one of the main event guys. He can wrestle a solid mid-carder and test that mid-carder to see if he's going to be any good. And secondly, it gets us closer to Tavion Heights being a singles act, which I'm really, really waiting for. I'm waiting for them to unleash the beast on Tavion Heights. But I love this idea. I thought it was great. He has really coming into his own in terms of a personality too. I'm talking about Miles Bourne now. He's getting kind of cocky. Even though he talks weird, has that weird voice, it's still, he's confident. He doesn't come across as being a shy guy or awkward or anything like that. He's just a little bland in terms of presentation. He needs some flash. He needs some sizzle, which they got time. They got 2 or 3 weeks to put something on him. And then, of course, he's going to come out of this thing probably bigger than he went in. And this is the way that you respond to cuts, right? When you start cutting talent left and right, and NXT wasn't harmed that badly. Well, the men's division was not harmed that badly by the cuts. But when there is cuts, you show people that opportunities still exist. This is what the cuts are all about. They open the door for other people. And Miles Bourne getting this spot, of course, Oro Mensah, who was probably like the highest level NXT talent that was cut, he wasn't exactly in the way. But ultimately, you want to show people that, hey, these guys have been here a while. They've been working their asses off. Let's give them a shot too. And the only thing I would question is it being a pay-per-view match. If it was on NXT next week, it'd still be fine. But as a pay-per-view match, I'm expecting a lot. I'm expecting a hell of a lot. Anyway, later in the show, Charlie Dempsey thinks he's going to be able to muscle his way into this match because Miles Bourne ain't quite ready for it. And then said he's going to stretch the fat head of Obafemi and all this. Obafemi walked up and to say that he was impressed with Miles Bourne's performance. And Dempsey told Obafemi, look, you're going to be wrestling me at Battleground. And everybody's confused because they're like, but Miles Bourne won. And so Miles Bourne, who is, deaf, starts telling Obafemi all these things he heard that Charlie Dempsey said about him having a fat head and leaving him quickly in fear and all this stuff. And so Obafemi was like, oh yeah? And then he said, well, maybe if Dempsey beats you next week, it'll be a triple threat match. And Obafemi was like, no. I'm done with triple threat matches. Which I agree with. I'm also done with triple threat matches, fatal four ways, and every other bungled match. I'm even almost done with battle royals now too. Shit. So, all right, Miles Bourne, I like it. So, because Trick Williams lost this match due to Joe Hendry, there was some brawling between the two. Backstage, Joe Hendry is pacing in the locker room. Ava says that she has talked to Santino and they have booked a TNA championship match for Battleground. Joe Hendry versus Trick Williams 1-on-1, which is great. That's great. I was questioning whether they was going to do it on TNA or whether they was going to do it in WWE. And them doing it in WWE kind of leans towards Trick going to win that title. Why else would they be doing it at Battleground? Why not? I mean, don't TNA have a pay-per-view coming up? They got a couple of big events coming up. And they've been building Mike Santana as a top contender over in TNA. That's what making me think that they won't switch the title, because they probably wouldn't want Trick Williams to beat Joe Hendry and then have to defend against Mike Santana. But it might be a great transitional run where Santana doesn't have to beat Joe Hendry. He can beat Trick Williams. That would be a way of Mike Santana being one of the top baby faces and Joe Hendry being the top baby face and not splitting the audience is that you could put the belt on Trick Williams and then have Trick Williams lose it to Santana. You could do that, but just the fact that the match is happening on an NXT pay-per-view is huge. They're platforming, of course, TNA big time. And if Joe Hendry wins, he got a big victory on a TNA pay-per-view. On a WWE pay-per-view, and that could be pretty cool. If he loses the belt, then an NXT guy is the TNA World Champion, and that is very fucking cool. And that could mean a whole lot of different things there. But I was wondering when they were going to do this, when they were going to do a singles match, and which show they would do it on. And WWE has, I guess, pulled TNA into their orbit. But there is no doubt that Trick Williams will be wrestling in TNA. I think they've already booked him for some kind of tag team contest and some pay-per-view they got coming up. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't book him for singles matches too. So it ought to be good. I'm leaning more towards maybe Trick should win. I just kind of want it for the chaos, because a lot of the TNA fans are losing their minds at the amount of NXT on TNA. And they have to realize TNA destroyed their roster. And that's one of the things that they don't pay attention to, especially if you watch the show sporadically and you don't follow the wrestling news. TNA basically obliterated their own roster by telling guys to take pay cuts. So a lot of people basically left. That's what made guys like Josh Alexander leave. They were like, wait a minute, taking pay cuts? I don't know about that. And they've been subsidizing their roster with NXT talent because, WWE is paying them. So I'm pretty sure TNA probably gives them something, but WWE is paying them. So it's just a different platform for WWE to do stuff. So there's a lot of activity there, and I like it. Back to the beginning of the show, Zarya defeated Kalani Jordan. Match was okay. Kalani Jordan had did a move, and she fell into Sol Ruca, who held her up, and the two looked at each other like, oh, I don't know what that was about. But it seemed like Sol Ruca was holding Kalani Jordan in place because Zarya speared her through the barricade, then finished her with her finisher. After the match, Zarya continued to stare at Sol Ruca, still building this heel turn that's upcoming. When it comes to Zarya, not only should she not be a babyface, not only should she not be in a tag team with Sol Ruca, she also should not have pink hair. She reminds me a lot of big Luna Vachon. That's what I want to see out of her. That's what the WWE Women's Division is missing. That's what I think Shotzi as a heel could have been. We need a Luna Vachon, Bull Nakano style character in WWE. And they don't have one. They got Piper Niven being fat and useless. They got Nia Jax being fat, garbage, and useless. And Zarya is not fat. She's a big girl, but she's not fat. And if they lean into what they presented, this thing could be great. But all the pink hair and the tag team stuff and the vaguely lesbian shit that they got going on, enough of that. Now that we've moved Gigi and Cora out of the way, let's get Zarya to be like the Bull Nakano, the Luna Vachon of this division. I'm talking big, nasty, vicious, something different for the division. That's what I want. Next, Jada Parker defeated Carmen Petrovich. They had gotten into an argument earlier where Jada Parker called Carmen Petrovich soft, and Carmen Petrovich had called Jada Parker a choker because she lost at the NXT pay-per-view, the last one. I don't remember what it was called. They had an okay match with Jada Parker winning with the Hypnotic. Then after the match, she had continued attacking Carmen Petrovich. Thea Hale, who was in the locker room talking to Carmen Petrovich when this happened, she was being a motivational speaker. All of a sudden, she runs to the ring to try to help Carmen Petrovich. And she ends up taking a running butt smash for her troubles. And she ends up falling to the floor. And then from that, Carmen Petrovich was able to fight back, and Jada Parker fled. So it was okay. The match was fine. Neither one of these girls are the best wrestlers yet, but Jada Parker has all the other tools. She's going to get it together in the ring, but everything else, knocking it out of the park. Personality, promo, attitude, whole 9 yards. The thing is, when it comes to Carmen Petrovich, is she's one of these people that martial arts. Bringing martial arts into wrestling is such hit and miss, because you know what you're doing for a shoot, but you have to pull. And you have to pull kicks and pull punches and all this kind of stuff. And it ends up looking terrible when you do that. Working what you know how to do for a shoot is incredibly talented. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a talent to do that. People like Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin and all them, Kurt Angle, they struggled with that. They were shoot wrestlers and had to learn how to work. And Carmen Petrovich is not like fucking Ronda Rousey or anything like that. But if she competed in Taekwondo or whatever, she's not used to pulling her punches and pulling her kicks, and it's going to take some time. I know that's what's the case with Lola Vice as well. It's going to take some time to actually start learning how to make your stuff still look good while also not taking somebody's goddamn head off. So Wesley and Tony D'Angelo had a problem. They'll be having a match next week. OTM is back. The two bums Jada Parker basically dumped on the side of the road. They're back again. I'm surprised they're still here. You'd think guys like them who couldn't get over would have been on the chopping block, or at least sent to evolve to get better. But nope, here they are. Still don't know who they are either. I don't know what their names are. Briggs and Inamura, they're a tag team. I was about to say former tag team. Inamura eliminated Briggs from the Battle Royal, kind of accidentally, kind of on purpose. And then Briggs walked up to Inamura. He kind of had an attitude, but not really. Inamura apologized for making mistakes and then says that he's already talked to Ava. He's going to go back to Japan. He wishes he could have been a better tag team partner for Briggs. It was all very sad. Briggs was like, no, I don't want you to go back. I don't want you to go back. And they shook hands, and Inamura walked away. And then Brooks Jensen walked up and said that Briggs is the problem. It ain't always your partner. Sometimes it's you. You're the problem, Briggs. I want to say this, though. Last week, Inamura lied to get a tag team championship match. Was it last week or was it 2 weeks ago? He lied to get sympathy, saying he was going to go back to Japan. And he wanted to get a tag team championship match before then. And Ava gave it to him. And then he chuckled about it with Briggs. And now, he knew Briggs was mad at him for eliminating him out of the Battle Royal. He did the same thing. He started, I'm going to go back to Japan. And Briggs was, disarmed by that. So I'm thinking he's faking. And this is a heel turn coming for Inamura. He's a very bland, chunky Japanese fuck. But if he might have something going for him if they turn him heel. It might be something interesting there. I know his excursion is almost over, too, as far as I can tell. I think some people said he's supposed to be going back to Noah in a couple of months. So maybe they're going to turn him heel here, see what he can do as a singles act. And, then he'll be back in Japan. But I'm also surprised that Josh Briggs is still around. Josh Briggs and JC Jane are now officially the last two members because Andre Chase, Harlem Bravado. He was there as well, the original Evolve, when that shit closed in 2020, 2021. Some of those people were brought over to WWE, and Shotzi was one of them, I think. Or Austin Theory, he's still on the main roster, so I guess that's 4 that's still around. But I'm surprised Josh Briggs is still there. I really am. I just don't see it working with him. I'm surprised he's still around. I don't know. But I guess the cuts ain't over. They ain't done. There's probably going to be some more later this year at some point or something. So expect like OTM and Josh Briggs to be on that. Okay, I'm not saying that I hope that happens. I'm just saying be ready for it. All right, the main event of the evening, Jordynne Grace defeats Julia to be the number one contender for the women's championship in NXT. And this was something. Before we get into that, though, Lola Vice said that she wanted to challenge whoever was the champion after Battleground, which feels like that's the third or fourth time she said that. She's having a hard time getting into the conversation around here. But Stephanie Vaquer and Julia had a pretty good match. They didn't have like the best match in the world, but they had a pretty good match. And it was stiff. I mean, my God, that Michinoku driver from Jordynne Grace, it looked like it was going to separate Julia's shoulder, for God's sake. But they did some really good combination moves, you know, especially Jordynne Grace. She like her spots are really pretty well put together. She did a stalling vertical superplex into a jackhammer, which was crazy. And she ended up winning the match with the Juggernaut driver. Julia looked good, of course. It was a very solid main event match. A lot of people are bitching about Julia losing. I kind of expected that she would lose. I mean, she's being featured a lot on the main roster, and it seemed like a slow but sure call-up. Again, it feels to me like there was Cora Jade's spot, and then Julia just slid right on in it, and then that's what happened. So now it doesn't seem like Julia is going to be in NXT much longer. So they're turning her heel, but she's not like a vicious, badass monster heel yet. They're still kind of dipping their toe in it, where she's not even not likable yet. She's just kind of dirty, I guess you could say. Jordynne Grace, of course, signed earlier this year. A lot of people expected her to get the rocket strapped to her back, but that hasn't been the case. I'm actually quite surprised in that myself. But a lot of that was Julia, Zarya, and Stephanie Vaquer all coming in around the same time. So now that the roster has thinned out a little bit, I'm not talking about like in releases. I'm also talking about like Julia has lost. She had her run with the title and she's lost it. Now Stephanie's having her run, and Julia and Roxanne are being featured a lot more on Raw. There's space now for Jordynne Grace to get in there and start doing her job. The only issue I have with Jordynne Grace is she's also quite plain. Yes, she's the juggernaut and all this stuff, but she needs to have more personality. You know, right now she seems like very bland pro wrestlery, and that's not really working for me in NXT. I'm expecting outlandish characters. I don't want her to wear like a crown or anything like that, but I don't need to wear like I'm the Juggernaut bitch, you know, big brown helmet or something. But I need something out of her. I need some more personality, and I'm not seeing a lot of that yet. But her versus Stephanie Vaquer should be really good. One-on-one singles match. There's no outside interference now because Julia's lost and Roxanne's essentially gone. So now they can have the kind of match I think they can have. And I'm teetering on the point of, should this be the main event? You know, I know that traditionally you want to have the biggest stars main event, which would mean the TNA World Title should main event. So, I mean, if you want to just say it's an NXT show, NXT should main event. At that point, Obafemi versus Miles Bourne is not a main event match. That's an opening match. It's a big match for Miles Bourne, but everybody knows he's not going to win. People are fairly sure Trick Williams is not going to win the TNA title. So, should you have that main event? Or let it main event just because it's a world championship, even if it's TNA's world championship? Your other option is, this is an NXT show. The match with the two biggest NXT talent should main event. And therefore, that would be this match. It would be Stephanie Vaquer versus Jordynne Grace. I don't know. I'll probably would have Joe Hendry versus Trick Williams main event just because it's a world championship match. And just to give TNA's championship that respect, especially since you downgraded it a little bit at WrestleMania, to elevate them by putting them in the main event of an NXT show, that could be fun. But I think this is a solid main event. But then again, I also don't remember where the show was being held. So maybe it depends a lot on that. But NXT was a very solid show. I'm not really a huge fan of the Battle Royal. I didn't really like all the talent that was in it. It was a bunch of bums, a whole lot of bums. Most of the matches were solid. The Julia Stephanie Vaquer match, the Julia versus Jordan Grace match was really good, but I don't think it was like phenomenal or anything like that. I certainly think they both have had better matches, and Julia certainly had better matches on TV. Kalani Jordan versus Zarya was okay. The Dark State stuff was fine. It was just okay. They didn't really further the Tony D'Angelo story at all, outside of him being mocked by Wes Lee. So we don't know what's going on there. They got a week to figure out what they're going to do about Luca Crucifino, which I think they murdered him already. So that explains it. To get written out of the Tony D'Angelo story, you get murdered. But there's that. Also, it was pretty funny, the visual of Jordan Grace trying to cut a promo earlier in the show, only for Izzy Dame to show up and tower over her. Even though Izzy Dame is skinny, she towered over Jordan Grace. And then, as they were talking, Lash Legend showed up. And it was like that scientific video you've seen where they compare, everything to the sun, where it's like Mercury, and then you see Venus, and it's bigger than Mercury, and then it's like Earth, which is like the same size as Venus, and then or Mars, and then it'd be like Earth, which is like the same size as Mars, same kind of size as Venus, and then you see like Uranus, and it's huge next to Earth. That's kind of how what they did. It's like little ass Jordan Grace, and then tall Izzy Dame, and then gigantic Lash Legend. I mean, she's absolutely massive as a human being. And it was even funnier because Jordan is short and stocky, like muscular. And then Izzy Dame shows up and she's tall and kind of skinny. And then Lash Legend shows up and she's basically an Amazon. She's both tall and muscular. So it was even funnier. So NXT was a fun show, as always. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to talk about Miles Bourne due to the amount of confusion that's being put out there. So what happens is Riley Osborne got injured, apparently. And he was released while injured, which is a rarity. WWE typically tries to avoid firing people while they're injured. But Brian Alvarez went on Wrestling Observer online and said, quote, "One of the big things was there are people that they want to go and help out Evolve. And I was told he did not want to go to Evolve. And he made it very well known." Okay, so everybody, of course, is like, this is so beast. This is so amazing. This guy's never done anything in wrestling, by the way. And this is so beast. He didn't want to go to, why would I want to go to developmental? Because you have no personality. That's why you would want to do that. But it turns out that he said it's not true. So what did he say? Let's get to it. So Josh Terry, which is his real name, says, quote, "I worked the first set of Evolve tapings the day after my wife was released." Pause. He is married to Blair Davenport, aka B. Priestley. That's his wife. He says, "When I was told by head coach on a phone call that night I could have it off tomorrow if I need time with my wife, as we had to pull out of the house. We were like 2 weeks from closing on. All I had to do was tell him, yeah, I'd just like the day to be with her. I was the first person in that building the next day and was commended on my professionalism. I will not have my work ethic questioned. When I was busting my ass in rehab to return which I knew the return would have been on Evolve. Not everything you read online is true. And he went to the Notes app to drop this joint, so you know he means it. So Bryan Alvarez, much like Dave Meltzer, going online, just saying whatever comes out of their mouth. And look, he might not have liked the idea of being on Evolve, and maybe that's what Alvarez heard. There's always a chance that these guys have heard whispers or rumors or gossip, but this is what I told you before. They put things out there, and then they wait for a reaction. They put it out there that Riley Osborne didn't want to be on Evolve. All the AEW nut huggers like, oh, that's so beast. That's so amazing. And then he has to come out and put out the real story. Now let's see if Alvarez will apologize and backtrack or not. I do believe seeing him on Evolve, but we do know this. Sometimes WWE sends people to places they don't want to go. Kurt Angle didn't want to be in ECW. He said that. Now, if you listen to what Kurt Angle was talking about when he was sent to ECW, drafted to ECW. In some interviews, he would say, man, it was the painkillers. I was dying. You know, my neck was bad. And then he'll talk enough, and then he'll be like, I didn't really want to be on ECW anyway. And you get the picture that sometimes guys don't want to do what is asked of them. And Riley Osborne was injured, so he wasn't like forced to be on Evolve anyway. So it's not like he was asked to be on an Evolve show. He said no, and then that was it. He got hurt and wasn't going to be featured on these shows anyway. So it's possible that Bryan Alvarez heard some whisper. There's always some nugget of truth in every lie. But how many times have these guys been called out? And then you see all of their fanboys online. And it's like, if you do like a laundry list of guys who have come out and said that Meltzer and Alvarez have been full of shit. And then they just poison the well by claiming everybody who calls them a liar is really just a con man. Oh, Bischoff can't call me a liar. He's a con man. Bruce Pritchard can't call me a liar. He's a con man. Oh, you really going to trust the word of Ric Flair? Do you really trust the word of Bradshaw, JBL? Do you really want to trust the word of Roddy Piper? You really want to trust the words of all these people? It's like, maybe if enough people come out and say that you're bullshitting and you're full of shit, especially over the span of many, many years, I don't know, man. If guys like Jake Roberts are like, you're full of shit. Guys like Al Snow is like, you're full of shit. Guys like Jesse Ventura are like, you're full of shit. It's like, maybe we ought to question these things, but there's always this opportunity that something may have, he may have mentioned something to somebody like, hey, can I get out of this thing? How long do I got to do this? Or whatever the case may be. But I found it humorous that he saw fit to even respond to this. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know that he was married to her. And it's crazy that they fired both of them, fired husband and wife. Now, how many couples have WWE fired? They fired Wentz and Gigi Dolan. They fired Bea Priestley and her husband. They're just getting rid of couples now. They need to get rid of them together. So it ought to be interesting. Oh, also, this is just kind of an aside, kind of a bonus because I didn't talk about it before. Dutch and Vincent, the Righteous, they were in Ring of Honor initially. They were in the old Ring of Honor before it was bought by Tony Khan. Then they became free agents and they were talked into going over to Ring of Honor again, Ring of Honor / AEW, and they got into that horrible feud with MJF where they got beat by MJF by himself. And they just kind of been floating like dead tree leaves for 3 years or whatever. And now they're teasing that they might come to NXT. They're teasing working with Karrion Kross. I mentioned that here because I believe they were actually in attendance when it comes to NXT. I believe they were actually in the building. And I'm not thrilled about this idea. Dutch has failed out of NXT once already. Vincent, I don't know how old he is, but he's got gray hair and he's been around for a while. We don't need any more gray beards in NXT, man. What we need is to let the young horses run. That's why I like about the Miles Bourne win. He's a young guy who has never had an opportunity, never really had a chance. Let's give him an opportunity. Let's do that. Let's not go backwards with guys who they've been in the business for a long time, but maybe just no. No. That was a big problem with NXT Black and Gold for my money. You know, I still do enjoy watching those shows, you know, as one-offs. But following that product where it was mostly guys like Samoa Joe, who has been on TV for a decade at that point, and Bobby Roode and Drew McIntyre, it was less fun than following the development of younger talent. And that's what I like about NXT. And I'm glad that NXT is starting to actually do that again, while also still having pretty good matches and angles and stuff. So let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe. Talk to you guys later. Peace out.